Hey, Southeast Missouri sports fans. Enjoy the show and want to take it on the go? You can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube. Tune in as they air by searching SEMO Sports Zone wherever you may be listening. Okay, welcome to the SEMO Sports Zone presented by A-Corp Sports. This is kind of a treat. It is middle of the week. Not typical for us in our broadcast schedule.
No, midweek broadcast here. It's something new here.
A little bit new. We thought with the intrigue of basketball and how many games we have to cover per season, we thought it'd be nice to kind of split up the week with 2 episodes. Dave, do you think that some games have happened and some shakeups have happened?
There's some games that have happened. I don't know about any shakeups, but there's been a lot of games where they jump into them quickly. And once it starts, it is nonstop. It's just game after game after game, and we got a lot of tournaments going on this week, so it's off to a good start.
Yeah, tournament time is always very busy, and like you said, they just jump right into it. Was there any game this week that really stuck out to you as just being like, wow, I just can't believe that happened?
Not so much that I couldn't believe it happened, but there's been some validation of some things that I thought would might happen, and there's been some games that just most games so far, with it being the higher seeds versus lower seeds, are kind of what we expected. So there really hasn't been any big upsets, I don't think, but some validation in some things. Regular season game, the Dexter Charleston game. I said on the last episode that I thought Dexter could beat Charleston. And they did.
You're vindicated on that.
Yeah. So good for me. Actually, sometimes I do know what I'm talking about. But yeah, but for most part, I think everything is just kind of held serve right now. I think we're getting ready in some of these semifinals and finals. I think we might be seeing some games that might surprise us a little bit. Yeah,
I think the biggest, like you said, the biggest score that sticks out to me is that Dexter-Charleston game, just because Dexter, like going into the SEMO conference, Dexter's the lower seed. So to see them already win, like at a regular season game, I mean, it doesn't make me reevaluate the seedings for the SEMO conference like in its entirety, but at the same time, it does make me go like, oh, well, hey, there's some weaknesses here that maybe it's not going to go exactly the way that we think it's going to go. So
yeah, I thought Dexter played really well in that game. I mean, considering a lot of their players are coming off of football. I mean, it was a very sloppy game, both sides. Charleston starts some freshmen and sophomores. They're very young. They're scrappy. They're they're athletic. They're gonna play hard, but they're just young. And Dexter was young last year. They're still young this year. They only have one senior on the roster, but they played really well. And the fourth quarter, they just kind of pulled away and. It's kind of what I thought, might happen. Just as, Dexter has a little bit more experience in Charleston, and that's not to say that next time they play that Charleston wouldn't turn the tables and beat them by 8 points or so. But I think the lower tier teams at SEMO Conference tournament are all kind of bunched in there together.
Yeah, that's pretty typical, I would say. I mean, last year, Kennett was kind of like the faller out of the pack, but I don't know what that's going to look like this year. Well, obviously they had a close game at the Gideon tournament, so maybe that like gap between them all is starting to narrow just a little bit. I still think that those top 4 seeds are pretty much, they're sequestered. They're head and shoulders above the rest of them.
Yeah, the top 4 seeds, you throw Poplar Bluff in there, 5, maybe they can do something. But after those top 5, I mean, it's that's all that I would throw in that top group there. But the bottom group, anybody can beat anybody, I think. And Dexter has just as good a chance as anyone to beat any of those teams. And Dexter's very balanced. I mean, that's one thing I noticed is they play about 10 guys, and they've got about 10 guys that can score. So I think it bodes well for them and bodes well for their future, because there's only one senior. So
yeah, the thing I've kind of noticed in the talk around like broadcasters especially is like you can tell who's going to be good and who's not, like even before the game starts by looking at a bench. Is everybody practicing on that same wavelength, everything like that? That's what you got to consider is like once you get into bench depth, that's where it really breaks apart, because like fast acting teams that can really score high, they get that cushion going, they can kind of ride out the rest of the game. I saw New Madrid do that a lot. Now that they kind of have to work on, bumping up these freshmen, getting them kind of the place that they want them to. I don't know if they're going to deal with the same problems they did last year of just they didn't have anybody on that bench that could cover those spots. And so if Dexter's a complete team like that with 10 guys that can all do pretty much everything that they need to, I think that's going to solidify them as a better team, especially going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to be a district champion or anything like that, but they're going to be much better than they were last year. I think they were 9-18 last year. They're going to win a lot more games than that, and they're just a much better team. And you know, I look at Charleston, and they're going to be a team a lot like New Madrid. They're very young. They're going to have to grow this year, but I would not want to play them come district time because they're going to be a Charleston. They're going to be a team that's really good defensively. They're going to be a team that can shoot it a little bit, and they're going to be a team that will frustrate you from the time that game starts to the time it ends because they're going to get after you defensively and be up in your grill the entire time. And so, you know, that's something that Charleston is known for, and they had it last night. It just didn't sustain into that fourth quarter. Dexter was able to pull away, but I think that I like what I saw from both teams last night. Yeah,
and to your credit, I mean, last year I counted Charleston out against Notre Dame, but obviously they played them and won and went on to play New Madrid. So I think for a lot of teams, definitely in that Class 2 district, are they District 1?
I believe they're District 2 or 3.
District 2, yeah. Wherever, you know, I'm sure Puxico looks at them on their schedule and it's like, well, we're not exactly afraid of Charleston right now, but don't count them out. I mean,
no,
especially later in the season.
We used to call Charleston the factory because every year they just deliver. All they do is deliver district titles, and it doesn't matter what their regular season is. And they don't. I mean, I'm not going to say they don't care, but they are focused for districts. They are not. You know, they're not going to lose any sleep over not winning the SEMO Conference tournament. They're not going to lose any sleep over not winning the Christmas tournament. But they look to that district tournament and they expect to bring home a district title. And they're talking about that after last night's game. You know, they were talking about, well, we got to do this for districts. We got to do this. I'm like, they're focused in, and that is the entire town talks about that district, winning those district titles. So that's something that means a lot to them. And I promise you that you're going to get their best game whenever they come in and play in districts.
I mean, it's definitely an experience walking into Charleston's gym and just seeing all the banners that they have hanging around.
Yeah.
So, kind of to talk about some other scores from this week. Sikeston hung 100 on a team.
Yeah, that Fox team, not very good, very outmatched against Sikeston, but Sikeston played really well. You talk about a team with balanced scoring. They got about 5, 6, 7 guys that can score. Very senior, very senior dominated team. They're going to be really good. I think they should probably roll through this tournament, at least to the championship. They'll probably see Cape Central in the championship, and we'll see kind of how that matches up. I don't know what Sikeston gets out of this tournament too much other than just some games, because usually, I mean, St. Genevieve, DeSoto, those teams just typically are not matched up very well with Sikeston. But, Sikeston has some other news this week that may be coming out. Markel Murray, the player from Cape Central, a really good player that he was ruled ineligible on Thursday. He's got a hearing, and supposedly he's supposed to find out, be the last chance for him to play or not. So we'll see if he'll be eligible on Friday for them.
For all year?
Yeah, this is from what I understand. I mean, he's either going to be ruled eligible to play or not eligible. So, I mean, this is his appeal. So this is his last chance, and we'll see how it goes. And that's kind of what everybody's just kind of waiting to hear. A lot of talk back and forth between people asking questions, but you really can't. It's going to be Misha's decision.
Mm-hmm. And that's been a talking point kind of all off season too. It's just like, is he going to play? Is he not? And, I get it. It's definitely, it's going to boost Sikeston up to maybe even the next tier of play that we're expecting them to be at. But at the same time, if he doesn't play, Sikeston has no issue.
No, they're still going to be a really good team. And I think they're still going to be a favorite to win their district and do something in Class 4. Just they're a lot better team if they have somebody of his caliber. Right now, at this point, it's just nothing but a distraction. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're just looking at it, and if you're Sikeston, you just want this to be done and over with, and make the decision one way or the other so we can move on. For the kid, you hope he can play. There's a lot of reasons to move, and a lot of reasons that aren't athletic reasons, and not to get into anybody's business, but not always. When people switch schools, it's not always for athletics,
right?
And, And so, so hopefully things work out for Markel, and this after Thursday they can move past this and make a decision is going to be made, and the team can move forward, Markel can move forward, and everybody can kind of talk about something else. Yeah,
and I mean, just for the team purpose, for the end of this tournament, Sykeston playing Cape Central, I hope it doesn't take any wind out of the sails of the SEMO Conference, just because, I mean, you never know what's going to happen night to night, but at the same time, seeing these 2 seed teams play each other and then have to play each other just the next week. I mean, that's, I don't want to call it anticlimactic, but there's a part of me that says that.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I know that, Sykeston has played in this tournament the last 3 or 4 years now, maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's not a long-standing tournament. They just won some games at the beginning of the year, and this opened up, and it just so happened to be with Cape Central. So you play Cape Central, this week, maybe the next week, and then you don't see them again until late February. It is a measuring stick, so I don't mind playing them, but I don't like playing them twice this early in the year, and then kind of waiting and playing them again at the end of the year, maybe twice. So you play them 4 times in a year. I don't like that.
No. So we've talked about some bigger school news. Let's talk about some smaller schools really quick. What do you think about South Pembescot?
I thought they looked pretty good in their first game. Robert Farmer, 27 points. I mean, they look good, really good. I mean, they played Delta C7, which not exactly a top tier team, but at the same time, I mean, they
got
look
82
good,
points out of it,
and they played really good defense on top of that. They're going to be a good team, and when they return everybody from last year, they made the Final Four last year, so they know what it takes to get there. They're expecting good things, and they're well coached, and so I expect South Pembescot to have a really, really nice season this year.
Yeah, and kind of adjacent, just to talk about it, Risco got 84 points in their first game in the Campbell Invitational. South Pembescot first seed, Risco second seed in the Clarkson tournament this year, so we are most likely going to be seeing them at some point play each other.
Yeah, that ought to be a good game. Assuming they play each other, but Risco has one of those teams that I think it's all culminating this year. They were good last year, but I think they've got a lot of players that are have a lot of experience. They were just knocked out of the districts by Richland last year. I think this is a team that Risco they're circling that, like, this is a team we can get to Columbia, and this is going to be one of their years. So South Pembescot kind of the same way. South Pembescot got a taste of it last year. They want to get back. So those are that would be a heck of a championship game in the Clarkson tournament.
Yeah, no, if that ends up happening, I will be so jazzed about it because got plenty of people that work in this office from Puxico, from Risco, that all want to see either South Pem fall or Risco rise. So what would actually happen in that game, I have no idea. I have heard so many things about South Pembescot being down this year. They evidently none of that is true. So
yeah, I'd heard they look pretty good this summer, but also in the summer you can't judge a ton of stuff by the summer games because you got guys that are missing. But yeah, I mean they obviously look good in their first game, and so we'll see what happens when they play Kennett. I expect that they kind of would have no problem with Kennett, and then they get a Hayti or an East Prairie, and that ought to be a heck of a game.
Yeah, let's talk about Hayti and East Prairie because I think that's going to determine a lot of seedings for the BCT.
Yeah, we were asked some earlier today about what we thought the seedings might be for the Bloomfield Christmas tournament, and I was really kind of conflicted. I'm like, well, a lot of it's going to depend on what happens between East Prairie and Hayti. I mean, I think East Prairie right now would be a higher seed in the Bloomfield Christmas tournament, but that could flip real quickly if Hayti beats them. And East Prairie's got to play better defense than they did the other night. Offense is not a problem for East Prairie. They've got 3 guys: Noah Johnson, Ty Wallace, and Connor Markham. Those 3 are going to score. But Hayti can score too. LaDon Webb looks really good. Javante Payne looks good. I mean, so that's going to be a battle between those 2 teams. And there may be a lot of points scored in that game.
Yeah, and not to shot call, I'm just going to say it. I usually have a team that I like to favor during the Christmas tournament for whatever reason. And this is always a pick with my heart. It's not statistics, anything like that. It's always a pick that just comes out of just what wavelength am I vibing with on a team. I typically pick Twin Rivers. This year I'm picking Hayti. I think it might be my team this year.
There you go. Hayti's a better pick than Twin Rivers, I think. I think Hayti is a team that is kind of flown under the radar all year. They've got a couple of kids that moved in from Poplar Bluff, LaDon Webb being one of those. His dad's the coach. And plus they've got a lot of young athletes that we saw on the football field that are now playing basketball, and they're going to be good. They're going to be very athletic. The question is, are they ready? Because, East Prairie is going to be, they've got a lot of experience. Hayti not so much. So we'll see if that plays a factor into anything on Thursday night when those two meet up. But, I think if I had to put money on a team, it might be East Prairie, but I would not be comfortable with that. I mean, because I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game, and it's going to be interesting to see how Hayti matches up.
And like you said about East Prairie with their defense, because when I look at that box score against Gideon, 88-72, I would not expect Gideon to score 72 points on a team. So I don't know really what to think about that for East Prairie. It's obviously going to be a shootout game when they do play Hayti, but at the same time, like, you've really got to buff up your defense if you want to keep your seeding spots.
East Prairie likes to get the ball up and down the floor, and they're going to give up points just because of the pace that they play at. They're going to give up some points. They're going to give up some easy baskets in order to get some transition going the other way. That's just going to happen. They had a pretty solid lead in this game. I think it was like 17, 18 points for most of the second half. They did kind of pull away, but at the same time, that is a lot of points to give up. And Hayti can score, so you're going to have to do a better job defensively on that. And it's early in the year, though. And, defense is kind of one of those things that I think is, in football, I think defense kind of starts off early, and you can kind of put your hat on to defense early a lot of times. I think in basketball, it's almost reversed a little bit because, it takes a while for you to get all five guys together on the same page. So defense sometimes is a little bit lacking in basketball at the start of the season.
But you also got to think about how exhausted players are by the end of the game, too.
True.
Once you start seeing, foul outs, things like that, that really changes tempos and what you actually have to do in those final seconds of a game, especially with no shot clock. See, it's an argument that keeps getting brought up. Who's going to use a shot clock? Who's not? When is it going to be implemented? It's optional for tournaments right now, which makes me feel like it's going to be mandatory sooner or later. So
yeah, you would think so, but you're going to have a lot of these smaller schools that are going to have to put some money into getting a shot clock, and then not only that, but then finding someone to operate that shot clock. So it may be a few more years away because it's going to take a while to implement it. And there's not a lot of tournaments right now that I'm aware of around the state. SEMO conference, from what I understand, is not going to use it.
I think there's one. I can't tell you what the name of it is, but I know it's a local-ish one.
I know that the Springfield, the big tournament they have in Springfield around Christmas, I think they're going to do it.
Okay.
The Blue Gold Classic or whatever that's called. I think they're going to do it, but there's not a lot that's going to use it yet. Like you said, probably eventually it will be implemented, but I think it's going to take some time because a lot of these smaller schools, they just don't have the funds to put that in there. That's not a cheap thing to put those scoreboards in, and then to find someone to run it and get it run right, because you're going to have to teach the officials too. So,
well, I definitely think it's going to change how many overtime games we see, especially because a lot of overtime games I'm seeing are caused because I hear the phrase from announcers, well, you have to foul. And once that option, that's not your only option. Once now they have to shoot it or they have to get the ball like going somewhere. I think that's going to change things. I think it's going to change a lot too, because you're not going to see as much desperation play.
Yeah, fortunately you don't see a lot around this area. You don't see a lot of holding the ball, but you see it around some parts of the other, in other areas around the state, especially out towards Springfield. I've seen a lot towards that way, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to change strategy for some games and things, but we'll just see but I would think probably in the next 4 or 5 years, it'll start being implemented a lot more. And I think eventually it'll be used in the tournaments around here probably in the next couple of years.
Quickly to talk about another team that's kind of in that running with like Risco and South Pemiscot. Let's talk about Richland really quick, because everybody was kind of down on Richland just a little bit. But at the same time, it's not really the best game to do a litmus test on, but 72-36 against Advance.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed from Richland this year is they're guarding a lot better than they did last year. They were a team last year that really kind of struggled defensively at times. And this year, I mean, in both games, even against Chadwick, they played really good defense. I mean, they struggled to score, but I mean, they play good defense, and they're playing, obviously a good defense against Advance, holding them to 36 points. I think Richland's going to be fine. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be peaking right around district time. I think they're going to be there. I think they're on a collision course with Risco. I see no other teams that are going to give them a problem. in that Class 1. So I think for them, it's just taking care of your business, kind of like we said with Dexter football. Just take care of your business, win your games that you're supposed to win. You're going to have some tough games here that but I think they should win the Orion tournament. But we'll see what happens whenever they get seeded in the Bloomfield Christmas tournament. But I expect they're going to get a pretty good seed. Yeah,
I mean, their toughest game this tournament looks like it's going to be Westwood Baptist, and I don't really know how that's going to go. So, I mean, for Richland, I mean, like everybody said, this is their tournament to lose. They're expected to win it. It's just by how much at this point.
Yeah, and I've said all along, I think the championship of this tournament is going to be that semifinal game against Westwood. I think that's going to be the best game. I don't know a lot about Westwood other than what I saw the other night against Kelly. By the way, I think Ross Peters put up another shot. He likes to shoot it. But he can score, and they're going to need that from him. Yeah. Kelly is. They're going to need him to score for them to be good. But man, I think that's going to be the championship game. I think Richland is better, but by how much, I don't know. I think that could be a good game.
So let's move on. We're going to do power rankings. We're going to start with small schools first. So that's classes 1 to 3. I am putting Puxico as my number 1.
I've got Puxico as my number 1 too, and I'm going to put a little bear with us on this because this
asterisk.
This is tough. This was tough when coming up with 10 teams and in the order to put them in. And I'm going to guess that we probably have we haven't looked at each other's picks. I'm going to guess that we have a lot of, after 1, I think we've got a lot of different ones. I'm going to guess.
I've got some weird ones too. We're still kind of figuring out the formula for, encirclement of what even counts as Southeast Missouri at this point, because, I see some scores posted from teams that I don't even know where that's at. And but you look on a map and it's relatively in the southeastern region of Missouri, so it's not like we're sequestered.
Yeah. So we're just going to figure this out as we go here.
So yeah, Puxico number 1. I feel like for early season especially, they're looking as dominant. It looks like they didn't miss a beat. They may even gotten a little bit better. Just from what they did last year.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I've got Puxico as my top small school. I mean, but and they're playing well. They beating Chadwick. That's a pretty good thing to put on your resume.
Threes.
Yeah, pretty good thing to put on your resume right at the beginning of the year. So,
my number 2 is South Penn.
My number 2 is Scott City. I think Class 3. I think they're going to have a really good chance to make a run. They've got a lot of guys back from last year. They're playing right now without Jackson Gloth, and he's going to be back. So I think Scott City's really good, and I think that they're going to make a lot of noise.
I think that's fair. It's a fair assessment. Scott City is also on my list. It's a little bit lower down just because I haven't seen them play as many games. And once I see them play a few more games, then I'll kind of, formulate thoughts a little bit more. That goes with everybody on this list.
That's everybody on this.
This list is so just very quickly formulated of looking at some play, some box scores, things like that, and just making some kind of just off the cuff adjustment. So Scott City number 2 for you. My number 3 is Risco.
My number 3 is Woodland. I think
Woodland.
I'm high on Woodland, and they just beat the crap out of Leopold the other night. And they're good. They're a team that I think nobody's really talking about, but they've got some really good players. The Kinder kid is a really, really good player. He's just a junior. They're going to be really good. And so I think that's going to be a tough district, in Scott City and Woodland in that same district. I got them in my 3.
Okay. My 3 is Risco. My 4 is Hayti.
My 4 is South Pemiscot. You've already kind of talked about them a little bit, but I think they're going to be really good. They're slotting in my 4. They could be number 1 next week. They could be number 10 next week. I don't know. It's just these things are so fluid right now. But I really like what South Pemiscot's got right now.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue I had with them last year was consistency, because they would have flashes of just being extremely good, and then they would just kind of peter out for most of the game. That ending game against Puxico, especially, I don't want to say they got lucky with how they won it, but it kind of felt like Puxico gave up, and not really gave up, but just kind of fell behind and never really caught back up. And what South Pemiscot did for that ending, that was just a heave. That could have gone either way at the last second.
And really they were a team that, going into that game, nobody really gave too much of a shot. Everybody kind of thought Puxico was going to roll that game. So South Pemiscot, the people are just kind of finding out about them, really from that game on. They really didn't pay much attention to them last year. But, like you said, they were an up and down team. But they're off to a pretty good start this year. We'll just see.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to go from the identity of well, who are you guys, to kind of feeling like you have a target on your back.
Yeah, they got that target real quick. When you go to the Final Four, that target gets drawn on, and your people start following you a little bit.
My number 5 is Charleston.
My number 5 is East Prairie. East Prairie, like I said, I think they can score. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they match up here against Hayti. And I'm going to jump ahead of you here. Hayti is my 6,
okay.
So they're right there together, and that will possibly flip-flop after Thursday night.
Yeah. And, now you say that with East Prairie, like I'm looking at my list and it's just like, I didn't include East Prairie. I know better than that.
There's a lot of teams.
There's a lot of teams.
Yeah, and that's what people, I'm like, if you think it's easy, just get your own list out and just write down the top 10 teams in Southeast Missouri and see, and then go back and look, a little bit later and see, oh, did I forget somebody? And yeah, it's not easy. It's not.
Not to mention when classes start shifting too of who's and what, because, Charleston is, I'm typically looking at them in like a higher class too.
Yeah, you always think of them as a higher class. I always do. I always think of them as being, a class, bigger school, because that's who they play typically.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the bias of the SEMO conference that I look at every team in that. I'm just like, well, they all must be class 4 and above, but not the case.
Yeah.
So my number 5 was Charleston. My number 6 is Richland.
Like I said, my number 6 was Hayti, and my number 7 is Charleston. So I've got them in there. I think, and again, I think they're a team that's going to go up this list eventually.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too, just because, how close they played Dexter. I mean, just off of class, like bias and like, point, how that works. They weren't expected to win against Dexter just in that sense, but as a team to play it that close in the class they're obviously going to move up this list going further into the year. So my number 7, I took East Carter.
Yeah, I honestly don't know a lot about East Carter. I know that they're supposed to have a pretty good team, but I don't know much about them. So that's a team that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing. I think they play down in the Clarkton tournament.
Yeah, currently the 3rd seed.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they, because they're just a team that really doesn't play a lot in this immediate area, and so I don't get to see them a lot. My number 8 is Risco.
See, I took Scott City for my number 8 just for the reasons I said before. You're very high on them, and that's fine. I just haven't seen them play that much. And once I see that, they'll probably bump up, bump down. Who knows?
I think Risco's really good, and I have Richland as my 9. I think both of them are really good, but then I've got Charleston as my 7. And I'm like, if they matched up, do I think Risco and Richland could beat Charleston? I'm like, I don't think so. Maybe, but right now I think Charleston maybe would win that game. So that's why I have Risco as my 8. But again, that I could have them my number 2 next week. I don't know.
I think it's all fair points. I mean, it's the consequence of we don't really get to see these teams play each other. So It's very hard to gauge like who's better than who. I mean, you have to go off of like common opponents at that point. But we're so early in the season that's not really a factor.
And really, it's hard to do that too, because different styles play different ways, and it's other teams. Some teams match up better with others, and it's just a guess right now.
So for my number 9, I took New Madrid.
Like I said, my number 9, I took Richland, just because Richland under Risco after they beat them last year. But I think they're really close. I just think Risco has got the win. Richland does have the loss. So even though it's a loss to the defending Class 1 state champs, I still am. I'm still going to count that against them. Just one little spot.
I get that. I took New Madrid for my number 9 just because of kind of the same reason we talked about Charleston is that this is a very young team. I think they're going to progress. You can already see the progression track that they're on. I think once SEMO conference is over, they're going to get a lot more fluid with themselves. They're going to know kind of how to work as a team. I think that's the biggest thing is that you need a leader on that team. And I don't really see it right now.
Yeah.
But once you get that, I feel like they're going to lock in and they're going to play a lot better. That's just my expectation.
Yep.
My number 10, I took Campbell, but I also was just like, I don't really know who to take for a number 10.
Okay, my number 10, I have 2 teams written down here. I have Caruthersville and Campbell. And I don't know. You can flip a coin for that one.
Yeah. I was very impressed with Campbell at the Riverbend.
Yeah. With the exception of the third quarter when they didn't score, they looked really good. So I think I'm going to go Campbell there too. Caruthersville I think Caruthersville will be there eventually. I mean, they're kind of in football shape. We saw that at the Riverbend. They're just not real crisp in doing anything right now. I think, and they played Poplar Bluff pretty close on Tuesday night. So I think Caruthersville is going to have a chance to be really good, and we're probably going to be just like, how'd you not have them in your top 10 when the season ends? But I'm going to go with Campbell.
I think especially for this first round of power rankings, let's put a giant asterisk next to all these teams.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just kind of a start. We're some of these teams are 2 games in, so we're putting our names to this. When the AP does it, you're just seeing the combination of all the votes. You're not seeing the individual votes. So
yeah. So prepare your criticism, prepare your laughing emojis for whatever you want to use them for.
Yeah.
This is week 1 that we're doing this, and we're going to see what happens.
Yeah.
So to kind of move on to large schools, 4 through 6. So it's going to be a top 5. Who's your number 1?
My number 1's Sykeston. I'm pretty sure that would probably be yours too.
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think there's any reason to think that Sykeston isn't the most dominant team in the area right now.
Yeah, I would think that they're the favorites, and we'll find out in the SEMO Conference tournament if that. I mean, Cape could knock them off here, I guess in this DeSoto tournament, but. These rankings will change a lot, I think, after the SEMO Conference tournament, or may stay the same. Maybe we know what we're talking about.
See, that's where I'm hesitant because I don't really want to put a stamp on anything's going to change here because, I mean, I don't know what your top 5 looks like. If our top 5 is the exact same, very funny. I could see it just staying the same throughout the year.
Yeah, throughout the most part of the year, yeah.
My number 2 is Cape Central.
My number 2 is Jackson.
Okay. I debated putting Jackson there.
Jackson went up and got second place up in the Borgia tournament. That's a really tough tournament. They lost to a very good priority team. Sykeston will play that team later on this year. That team's really good. Just the number of games and the games that they played in that tough tournament, finishing second, because like I said, it was close between them and Cape Central, and there's just more of a you just have more of more to go off of than you do Cape Central with just their 1 game. So that's why I put Jackson at 2, and then I've got Cape Central at 3.
And I've got Jackson as 3. So number 4, I put Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame's number 4, and they just went nuts against Fredericktown. That team could be really good. And again, I think that's a team that may cause Sykeston some problems in the SEMO Conference tournament.
See, I have a narrative built in my mind. I like to attribute things to teams, even if they aren't factual. I feel like Sykeston's playing bad guys, and Notre Dame is the up-and-coming face to Sykeston's heel. I don't know if that's true, if we'll even get there, but that's my dream matchup right now.
I feel like it used to be the opposite back when Notre Dame. Everybody was saying that Notre Dame recruits. They had it going with Coach Hale and they'd play Sykeston and everybody would be for Sykeston because Notre Dame was the private school and now I think because Sykeston's had so much success over what you could be right that it is kind of flipped, and since Notre Dame hasn't really been a factor in the last 7-8 years. I mean, they had a district title and were making a run there during the COVID year, but that was when it was canceled. But other than that, they've really kind of not been a big factor. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at Sykeston. I can't tell. I mean, obviously, I don't know what all the players on a team are thinking, but when you have to play against Sykeston in the SEMO Conference, you can just tell there's just like this kind of feeling that's just like, great, now we have to play Sykeston. Yeah. So I think for most, I think for most teams, if they're just like, we can compete with Sykeston, I think that's a even resting on that, like those make for great games. Like New Madrid Sykeston, one of the best games I've ever seen, just because of like, these are 2 teams with amazing athletic talents that I don't even know who to root for, like once they're actually playing. So
yeah, it's and the field house just breeds that discontent for some of the for all the other fans, just because you're playing in the field house every year. We talked about that in the last episode. That you're playing there every year, and Sykeston plays so well there. Yeah, and they just have a different edge whenever they play in the field house.
Yeah, I mean, it's their territory; they own it. Mm-hmm. So to move on, my number 5 is Poplar Bluff.
My number 5, I'm going to put Dexter in there. And the only reason I'm putting Dexter in there is because, they beat, they did beat Charleston. They may not get back in there because if SEMO Conference tournament, Poplar Bluff, could show that they're the number 5 team. And then again, like you said, it's pretty much that way for the entire year. So I threw Dexter in there. It was close between Dexter and Poplar Bluff. So I went ahead and gave Dexter a bone this week since they got the good win against Charleston.
And I mean, hey, that I'm an alumni, so I'm always going to say, hey, if Dexter can move up, I mean, good for Dexter. But, I've also kind of accepted the fact that we've been sequestered to an 8 seed for a while now. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, they probably should have been the 6th this year, honestly.
Yeah, looking at it.
I thought so going in, but, Dexter, they just were just not very good last year. And, you hear everything about, well, you got a lot of guys back, but they were the same guys last year. Mm-hmm. So, you don't know how much better they're going to get, but Coach Allen does a really nice job with them. And I really thought that with New Madrid and Charleston and Kennett kind of still being, Kennett still being down, New Madrid and Charleston kind of dropping a little bit, I thought Dexter might have got that 6th seed, but, they hung on to that 8th seed, and they sometimes that works out, because you're going to get the game against you'll get the game against Kennett. You win then. I mean, you're going to lose to Sykeston, but then you've got a game against Poplar Bluff, and we'll see if this 4 or 5 we'll see if this 5 for Dexter, 5 for Poplar Bluff is the way to go, probably.
Well, you're just assuming that Poplar Bluff's going to lose that game.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, if the seedings go as planned,
as predicted.
But and again, I said it wouldn't shock me to see Poplar Bluff win. I think it's the top 5 teams in that are kind of separated. But like I said, I'm throwing Dexter a bone this week, because they may not be back on those rankings after next week.
Yeah, I mean,
they're 1-0.
Personally, looking at that score, I was just like, oh, let's go. So, exciting times for basketball in general, especially when you can play teams that you're not expected to win against. Because a Charleston-Dexter matchup, in my mind, I feel like that's an easy win for Charleston most years. Now that it's kind of separated a little bit, it's bringing back that excitement of just I wonder who Dexter could win against now.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they do in the Bloomfield Christmas tournament, and where they're going to be seated in that. I was, as we were going through the seedings, to pick them, Dexter usually plays well in that tournament. They usually and that win over Charleston could propel them to maybe do a top 4 seed. We'll see. I mean, they could be, 7. But I kind of figured that if they continue to play well, I think they get Malden on Friday night. They should win that, with Malden kind of depleted right now. They should win that one, and then you go into this SEMO Conference tournament. You beat Kennett. I mean, then you're going to be propelled over them. So then you're not expected to win any other games. So I think they could get a 4 or 5 seed if everything kind of plays out.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to see what kind of the ramifications of these games are going to be. And for the Bloomfield Christmas tournament, I'm just going to throw this opinion out there. Every time I see Dexter or Kennett in a higher seed, I kind of put an asterisk next to that too. Be could be 3 notches lower.
Yeah, and it's been that way for a while. And,
big team bias.
There is, but a lot of times, Dexter and Kennett are in those, semifinals and finals. So, they kind of do back it up at times. So kind of just to move on to an off-topic discussion, because I've just kind of noticed this. What do you like better? And it's weird to separate these out, because it's all small town in a way. But do you prefer these small inclusive tournaments, or do you prefer something more like the SEMO Conference that shows these bigger towns? I like both, and for different reasons. I think each serve their purpose. These small schools, I mean, I think this Orient Invitational tournament, the teams are not the best this year that they've ever been. But you've seen it. It still draws a pretty nice crowd, and it's talked about. It brings a lot of people into the community. The Gideon tournament, the same way. It brings a lot of people there, and it's good for the community. The SEMO Conference is going to get more publicity, more eyes on it. But that doesn't mean that these smaller schools don't have their own little niche down here, and they're really. I've always enjoyed going to games at Gideon with their gym the way it is. I've always enjoyed games there. Oran, it's kind of a cookie cutter, but it's still fun to watch a game there, because it's always packed. It's especially championship night. There's not a seat to be found, and it's just really good, nice atmosphere. So. I think there's something to be said for both the small school tournaments and the SEMO Conference. Yeah,
I would say, because it's the separation of just atmosphere is such a big thing, and it sways how a game goes. It sways what a crowd's reaction, or what anybody's reaction is to what team won. Oh, I'm actually from there. I moved very far away, but it's nice to see my alma mater just doing something cool. You see that a community outreach, things like that, when they happen with these small town tournaments. I mean, that's awesome to see, to me. And I think it makes it a much more electric atmosphere just in that sense.
Yeah, and I like seeing the Oran tournament, the Bulldog Classic. Those are really nice tournaments. The Woodland tournament used to be a pretty big tournament, and it's kind of fallen. I think there's just 6 teams in it this year. It's kind of it kind of maybe needs a revamping. But other than that, these small school tournaments, they're I mean, they have good teams, they have good games. They draw good crowds, and they're just fun, and and they're usually pretty evenly matched. I know the Campbell Bernie tournament that kind of switches, each year goes to a different place, and that's always kind of neat too. That it's the same tournament, but it's not at one place every year. They kind of rotate it, so that's always fun to watch too. So I think they all have their little niches, but at the same time, I mean, if I had to pick one, I'm gonna pick the SEMO Conference tournament.
I get that. I just know that this year, as of right now, there was one game that had me hyped up to see what would happen, and that was Orion Bell City, and I was not expecting that whatsoever. So, I'm excited for the I'm excited for the SEMO Conference, of course, but to see games like that being played in small gyms like Orion, I mean, that's special to the community, and I think, take pride in that.
Yeah, when you talk about there's a lot of talk about school choice and consolidating schools and things like that. When you talk about that, go to these games in these small schools and see what it means to these communities whenever they pack the gyms in for at Risco and Campbell and small schools like that. Whenever they pack it in and they're great crowds and what the school means to them, and that's the argument against some of that stuff that they talk about when you get into politics. I don't want to get into that, but it's a lot of pride in these communities with these basketball programs and things like that, and it's fun to see. It's fun to go to games like that. And, they have just as much, it's just as entertaining in those games as it is a SEMO Conference tournament.
All right. Dave, is there any game that you're looking forward to in the next 2 days that's going to sway some of your opinions?
I don't know about sway my opinions, but I am looking at the East Prairie Hayti game. I'm very interested in that. And then whoever plays in that championship game, which I'm assuming would be against South Pembiscott, I'm very interested in that. I think that's probably the tournament I'm looking at the most that could have the most impact as far as the Bloomfield Christmas tournament and seeding that way. And if Sykeston plays Cape Central, I'll be definitely interested in that game just because that's probably not your top two teams, two of the top three teams for sure in the area going to be going at it. And so I'll definitely be interested in that.
Same picks here. I'm also putting down Risco and Bernie. I want to see how that turns out. I have no expectation for it whatsoever, but I want to see how it turns out because that's going to impact some BCT seedings also most likely.
Right. Risco has more talent, but I'll tell you what, nobody's going to outcoach Coach Long. I mean, he does a great job with that Bernie team. They play a certain style and they play his style that, they're going to get down, they're going to guard you. It's not going to be a up-tempo game. They're going to slow it down. He's a really, really good coach. And if anybody can give Risco fits, it's Bernie.
Can't wait to see it. All right. That has been our first midweek episode of the SEMO Sports Zone. Thank you for watching.